recording. Cool. In the chat, when I start talking, ask, can everyone hear me? Just so we get a response quickly from that. I'll be able to see it up there.
Wait, so there's chat and questions?
Yeah. Chat usually isn't used very much, so change this to everyone. Okay. All right, ready?
Yep.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So someone type it. Good afternoon and welcome to our first ever technical deep dive. My name is Craig Tiffany. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Support here at OpenMesh. With me today I've got Brian Patterson, my Chief Sales Engineer, and a couple of our folks from support. I've got Stuart and Elliot who'll be helping answer questions. The goal of these events is to kind of do a deeper dive into technical presentations and technical aspects of our products and of our company. In the past we've done pretty generic overviews. We're going to start a new series where monthly we will be going through different topics and different titles for deep dives into technical topics. Next month will be a closer look, radio, power, and channels. And then in May, we'll have Make the Most of Captive Portal. So please stay tuned. We'll have a lot more of these coming on. All right, so kind of getting started, today's is about our switches. We announced these back in October, and before we go much farther, I'd like to do a quick poll to everyone just to find out, a little bit about what your background with our product is. So if you could quickly just answer this poll so we get a good idea of what our audience is seeing, I'd greatly appreciate it. Give you about 30 seconds to answer this poll. All right, about half of you have voted. If you could click where you're at, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right. We got about 3/4 have voted, so we're going to go ahead and shut off the poll, and I'll share the results. So the idea was, okay, who is everybody? And so about 18% were early adopters, the pre-ordered, bought in the first month. 30% of users have used them in the last 30%. Used them in the last 2 months. New, just bought them, are 7%, and none haven't even bought them or used them yet, so 44%. So that's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate it. We're back on the presentation. There we go. Fantastic. So we'll be going through everything kind of soup to nuts on this presentation. To give you kind of an overview, for those of you who have never heard of us before, never used the switch, is that all of our devices are cloud managed. They're connected via our cloud management portal called CloudTrax, and you can manage this from a web interface or from the Android or iOS applications. It really gives a single point of configuration for one switch or thousands you may have deployed today. It's also seamless, so we do deep integration with the access points along with the switches. And Brian will go a lot deeper into this, but it's just a quick overview that we do have a connection between these switches and between the access points so that we're getting the most we possibly can out of the switch infrastructure. The idea behind what we do is we try and create everything with a managed service provider or a professional installer in mind. And that goes from that cloud management to zero-touch deployment so that we're reducing the overall number of truck rolls and making it as easy as possible to buy, install, manage, and troubleshoot as we possibly can. Part of that is the zero-touch deployment. As long as we have the MAC address or serial number, we have the ability to configure and manage the device from anywhere via CloudTrax. We also, in our switches today, provide full AF power on all ports of all switches. So from the 8 to the 24 to the 48, you can fully load it with AF devices. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do AT, it just means that you'd be able to do AT on about half the devices if you were to deploy AT type solutions. So we can use up to 30 watts on all ports at any given time. Lastly, it's designed to fit. So what we're trying to do is come up with a series of switches that fit our marketplace. Our marketplace being the small, medium business, hotel hospitality, retail, as well as hotels and resorts and things like that. And generally speaking, that is a that's a switch that is not a chassis-based solution with slots. That's a all-inclusive device. And this is a layer 2 device. So you have the ability to remotely enable, disable, or power cycle the ports. You can do some layer 3 functionality such as VLANs and PoE budgets. You can view power consumption and much more from the management console. Lastly, they are custom brandable. So you have the ability to brand the switch itself. We have an open mesh logo on the upper left corner of every switch that's easily covered by a small sticker that you could use for your own. Or you also have the ability to custom brand the CloudTrax interface. And it's perfect for, again, for the system integrators, resellers, and IT consultants. And lastly, as with all of the products that we sell as Open Mesh, it's free for life. Once you've purchased the product, you get a 1-year warranty, you get non-advanced replacement RMA, you get email support for the life of the product, as well as upgrades and updates to the device for as long as we are supporting the device. So it's, when we say free for life, when you buy it, there are no recurring fees. Now, real quick overview. Now I'm going to hand it on over to Brian to kind of take us through what he's going to show on the switch today. Now, as I mentioned before, we do have people here ready to answer questions, so feel free to start firing off questions. We got people in the room who will answer as they come in. So, Brian, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Greg. All right, so I'm going to show you some actual pre-release switch features that were released. Those features, and we'll go from there. So when you first get to the switches panel here, you'll see an overview of all the switches you have here. And so right here we have an S8 switch that is that's sitting on our engineer's table, and you can see what the MAC address is, the IP address it got from the network, the gateway IP address of the router, and then how many ports are active, when it last checked into CloudTrax, its uptime, firmware version, and the power budget that it has and the power budget that it's been using. So this switch doesn't have any PoE devices on it, so it's reporting that there's 150 watts available. And you can also go over here into the Actions tab here and reboot the switch if you want to. Then to add a new switch, you just click Add New. You give it a name. So we're going to call it the S24 and call it, and then we're going to say that it's a 24 port switch and give it the MAC address. And then you can do a description if you like. Then once you've created that new switch, you can go in and set up the ports however you like, and get all of the settings ready to go so that when you go in and install the switch, all you have to do is plug it in. And then once you plug it in, it'll go and configure everything for you. Then once that switch is online and checking in, you can see more about it. So this is the 8-port switch. You see up here that this is the status of all the ports here. And then we have one of our new features that is being released very soon is that we automatically detect what port is your uplink port to the rest of your network. And so that is signified by the white dot here. Or you can look down here in the port descriptions, and you'll see that this port 9 is called the uplink port. And then on the 8-port switch, so you actually have 10 ports. So you can have all 8 ports here are PoE, and then these 2 ports here are just uplink ports without PoE. And then you also have SFP. So you can't use the SFP and the Ethernet uplink at the same time. And then on the 24 and 48 port switches, they have 4 SFP ports and all 4 of those SFP ports can be used at the same time. So then over here, for each port here, you can disable the link, and when you disable the link, that turns the port black. Then if you can also disable PoE or enable PoE. If PoE is disabled, then it'll be white. If it's enabled, then it will be orange. And then another new feature that we're releasing just a little bit later this week is the port stats. So you can hover over that port and take a look at the stats of that port. So we can see that all the unicast, multicast, broadcast, and discarded packets that it's done, and then the total number of frames that it's passed. Then you can also take a look at the MAC address table of the switch here, of that port. So we can click on that, and we see that there's a lot of things on our uplink port here. And then if one of these ports were connected to an access point, and that access point was also on this CloudTrax network, we would link you over to that that access point configuration page, so that if you see that that access point is in repeater mode or something, you can go and take a look at what's going on with that access point. So down here, this is where you set up your, you can set up a description of the port so you know what's connected to it. Your allowed VLANs here, so if you have your specific VLANs that you're passing through these ports, you would choose, you would add in those VLAN IDs in here. We automatically put in these 991 and 994 VLANs because those are VLANs that the access points use for seamless roaming on non-bridged networks. So those VLANs are used to communicate between the access points so that they can seamlessly hand off users from one access point to another, even when they're not on the same subnet. So in your PVID here, your ingress, that's the VLAN that gets tagged for all frames coming into that switch port. And so if they're coming into that switch port untagged, then they would get tagged with the VLAN that you have here. And VLAN 1 is just by default your untagged VLAN. Then on the egress here, your untagged VLANs, so all frames going out of that port would get tagged with the VLAN that's specified here. In other switch manufacturers, that could be is commonly called your native VLAN. Then we have the new feature here for the voice VLAN, and I'll show the setup for that a little bit later in a few other settings. So if you wanted to enable the voice VLAN on this port, you would just click that. And then if you wanted to isolate this port so that it can't talk to any other ports, you could select that here. We also have our new features of MAC access list and an IPv4 access list. I'll show those to you a little bit later as well. And we also have quality of service now. So ingress and egress quality of service. And you can rate limit the ports for each one, and it would limit that port for receive and transmit to the specific megabit per second that you want. And we also have a few more options here. You can set up to say that if it goes over 20 watts, then that port is shut off for PoE. All right, so now I'm going to go over to the General tab here. So for each switch, we'll have some general settings that are specific to that switch. And so you can enable IGMP snooping and what version you want that IGMP snooping to be on. And you can specify what VLANs you want IGMP snooping to be on. Then you can enable your voice VLAN. And your voice VLAN would be that anything that has a MAC address of the OUI here. So the first three sections of the MAC address here identify the manufacturer. So by default, we have several devices in here from 3Com, Avaya, Pingtel, and if you have something else such as a Polycom phone, you could add in the OUI for that in here. And then anytime the switch sees that OUI, it will automatically put that device's traffic onto the voice VLAN. And you specify the voice VLAN over here. So you could say that it's going to be on VLAN 1, 993 or 4, and anytime you set up a new VLAN, allowed VLAN in the port, then it's going to allow you to put that traffic on that VLAN. And then you can select the priority that you want that voice VLAN to be. So 0 being the lowest priority and 7 being the highest priority. Then we also have the quality of service here, and just to let you know, the voice VLAN and quality of service here are the new features that will be coming later this week. And so you can enable the quality of service on this particular switch, and you can to select which priority scheduling method you want it to be, and then what kind of trust you want it to be. So you can do the 802.1p, you can do DSCP, or you can do both. And now the switch has its own priority queue, and I will show you how to set that up over here. So if you go into Configure and then Switches, this is where you set up your global switch settings. So all of the switches will get these settings and they'll be applied. They're not on a per switch basis like that general section I was showing you earlier. So by default we have spanning tree turned on, and the version of spanning tree that we default to is RSTP. If your network is using something different, you can switch it over to STP or MSTP. We also have SNMP available for the switches. It's a read-only SNMP, so you can get just some basic stats from the switch to input into your network management program. And this is also where you can set up what your community name is going to be. All right, this is the section where you can add the MAC addresses for your OUIs for the voice VLAN. And from here, you can edit the existing ones. You can delete them off of here if you want. Then you can also set up your quality of service mappings. So on our switch, there are 8 different priority queues, with the queue 1 to being the lowest priority and the queue 8 being the highest priority. And DSCP here, as you can see, has 64 different quantifiers of traffic priority. And so by default we have it set up so that 0 through 0 through 7 are priority are in Q1, and then 8 through 15 are Q2, and so on. And then the COS is quite a bit more easy to read here. There's not quite as much going on, and so we've just mapped that to be 0 through 7, and then 2, 1, 3, 4. We also have access control lists here. So on the access control list, we have a MAC-based access control list. So if you want to add a new MAC address entry for that, you go in here and you give it a name. The sequence. So this sequence number here, this is the order in which your access control list will be applied. So your sequence 1 is going to be the lowest, is going to be your first one that gets processed, and then you can go all the way up into several thousands, and then whichever one comes first will be processed first. You can choose whether you want to allow or deny it, and then you can have your source and destination MACs in here. If you want it to be a wildcard, what you can do is just put in zeros, or you can even do it just be a wildcard of an OUI. So if you wanted that to, let's say, for instance, Siemens here is 0001E3. So we want that to, let's say, deny all source MACs from a Siemens device, and then we can save that, and then if we want it to go to a destination, if we want it to go to any Siemens device going to any destination gets denied. And I need to put a sequence number in there. So save that, and then we're good. So then, and you can also have an IPv4 based access control list, and that one you can just, it also has the name and sequence, and then you can allow or deny, and then you can specify what protocol you want. So if it's an ICMP, TCP, or UDP, so you can say a source IP, a destination IP, and then the source port. So if we wanted to filter out, let's see, DNS. That's port 53, right? Yeah. And if we want it to be, we say we don't want our device at 192.168.3.2 passing DNS traffic to 8.8.8.8. So we don't want them using Google DNS. We just put that in there, and then it'd be good to go. Oh, I forgot to do those things, but I'll leave those off for now. All right, so then the last thing I wanted to show you is the maintenance here. So with the access points, you have a maintenance window, and you can choose the firmware release you want the access points to be on. The switches are also the same. So you can choose which model each firmware you want it to be on, and since this is a development network, we can choose lots of different firmware versions we want. On the production networks, we only have usually 1 or 2 different firmware releases depending on our release cycle. Right now we're doing switch firmware updates about every 2 to 3 months as we're adding new features, and that'll slow down over time as we get more and more things built in. So all of your switch and access point firmware upgrades take place during your maintenance window. So right now you can set your maintenance window to be 24 hours, so that means anytime we push an upgrade, it'll be installed immediately. Or if you want it to be, and most times you would want it to be set for a specific period of time. So if you want it to be just at 2 a.m., between 2 and 4 a.m., you can set that. You can also set what active days you want it to be. So if we don't want it to upgrade on the weekends, we just turn that off. So that is the demo that I've had so far. If there's any more questions we can go through, we can do that. And I'll switch back over to Craig.
Do you want to take some of the ones that you can see
Sure.
that are unanswered?
Let's see. Well, there's a roadmap question in there. So actually, there's one more roadmap. We were going to show a roadmap here that'll show you what's on our immediate roadmap in the next future. I'll first show you here our model lineup. So we have our S8, 24, and 48 port switches. All of them have the same features that I just showed you as the 8 port. It's just a matter of how many ports you need and how much power budget you have. And pricing, MSRP, $299 for the S8, $749 for the 24, and $1399 for the S48. So this is our roadmap for the new features. We have, in version 1.0, we had the basic features, and we've released 1.0, 102, 111, and then 121 is what I just showed you, and that includes the auto detect uplink, port forwarding table, the byte counters and error counters, the access control list and port isolation, and quality of service. All right, so let's see, what is a question I can answer here? So, are jumbo frames supported? Yes, jumbo frames are supported. So what provisions are there for bad firmware updates? So we use a dual flash partition, so anytime we issue a firmware update, the active partition doesn't get overwritten. It flashes the new firmware over to a secondary partition, and then it boots up from that partition, and if that boot fails, it will fail back to the other partition, and then it'll try again. Let's see, the maximum number of VLANs is 255. And let's see, with port bonding. Port bonding is usually just another name for link aggregation. So that's what we have in here. Let's see. So, do we support 220 volt power? Yes, we do. When you're ordering the switch from the website, you just choose which power cable you need. By default, we have the North America cable in there, but the power supply supports both 110 and 220 volt power. Let's see. Let's see. Craig, do you want to answer the warranty questions?
Quit moving your mouse. Okay. So as of right now, the question is, can the standard 1-year warranty be extended? Right now, it cannot. We're working on offering a 3- and 5-year option. Hopefully to have an announcement by the end of next quarter.
All right. So I saw a question there. Is there a console interface as backup? There is a console interface, but it is disabled by default, and it's only used for advanced troubleshooting, and it can be enabled by support on a case-by-case basis. And can you assign the switch a static IP address? No, just like our access points, we require DHCP because everything is cloud managed. We want it to be as simple as possible to set up. So We want you to be able to just plug it in and get an IP address and get it out to CloudTrax and download the configurations. So if you want it to be at a specific IP address, we recommend setting up a DHCP reservation on your DHCP server. Let's see, somebody asked when the new release will be in my portal. We're expecting to release it. The new firmware update is being released today, and so it should be installed on your network by the end of the week, and then we'll push the interface updates for CloudTrax probably either tomorrow or Friday, depending on how it gets through QA.
All right. Is there a supported SFP module list available?
We have tested a few SFPs from a couple of different manufacturers, but any SFP module that's 1 gig should work. We also sell 2 different SFP modules in our store that are rated for 550 meters of fiber and 10 kilometers of fiber. Somebody asked what the difference between the S24 and S24 V2 is. Craig, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So the S24 versus the S24 V2 is mostly cosmetic. The device is a little bit not as deep as it was before, and the fan has been changed, so it's a much quieter solution. So it's essentially cosmetic and sound.
So yeah, somebody just asked, will the switch with an open mesh access point allow for additional bandwidth control? No, the bandwidth control in the switch is completely separate from the bandwidth control via the captive portal on the access points. So you can, with the switch flow control there, it will limit all traffic going through that port. And then on the access point, it will limit each individual client that's going through. So if you want more granular control about how much each client, how fast each client can go, you would set that up on the access point side. So Sean just asked, does the 8-port have a fan? Yes, it does. It's not very loud. In a very quiet room, you would definitely hear it, but in a normal office environment with normal office noise, it's not very noticeable. Most of our support people have those 8-port switches on their desks for troubleshooting and to replicate issues, and they don't seem to have gone too crazy because of it so far.
We got one here. I noticed from looking at the S24 and S48 pics on the website, they both have a slot on the back for a redundant power supply. What is the cost of the redundant power supply module? We're not offering it yet, looking at making that an option later this year.
All right. So there's a question about another question about SFP modules, whether they're single mode SFPs as well. And yes, we sell both single mode and multi-mode SFP modules. Let's see. So
a lot of SMTP or SNMP. Did we address SNMP?
A little bit. So the SNMP by default is just some basic level data that will tell you some information about like the switch name and description, but it's read-only, and you can't make any changes via SNMP.
So it's a great point. With the switches as well with all of our APs, CloudTrax itself, the devices themselves are clients to CloudTrax or other management consoles. Everything we build with an API in. So all the information we get via CloudTrax is available via an API. Conscious decision we made several years ago to go to API rather than SNMP route. So as of today, on the switches we can do, I think it's ID and description are the two MIVs that we support.
Let's see. So somebody asked if you can set up radius access or 802.1x on the switch. That's not something we have in CloudTrax right now. The switch firmware does support it, so it's something we'll add in the future, but we don't have it in there right now. Scott asks, can you use third-party SFPs? Yes, you can. They are standard SFPs, so you can use anything you have there that's 1 or 1.25 gig SFPs. Let's see. Will there be a way to apply global settings across networks? So yeah, so you can clone the settings from your CloudTrax networks over to another network. Switch settings, some switch settings are individual to those specific switches, such as those port settings. So you can't do that right now. It's something we're looking into, having profiles for specific switches so that you can apply those as you're installing.
Will using the switch with open mesh access points allow for any additional bandwidth control? Meaning, rather than setting upload-download limit, have it dynamically adjust based on the number of users. So if you have a 50 megabit connection, it will limit 5 users 10 megabit each. If you have 10 users, it will limit it to 5 megabits each. Not at this time.
No.
Yeah, we're not looking at dynamic controls right now. Next question is, does the 8-port have a fan? Yes, it does. I think we already answered that one.
Yes.
I was looking at questions while we're doing that. We can use the switch for make setup for a radius access.
I just answered that.
Okay. Are you working on a router product? We're always looking to expand our current product line. We're looking at expanding up and down from a switch perspective, as well as functionality. We have nothing to announce right now, but we are hoping to be able to make an announcement within the next few months about the next generation networking equipment, wired networking equipment that we will have.
So Brian asked, how long does it take the switch to boot and become usable? So the each model takes a little bit longer than the others. So the 8-port is going to be faster because it only has those 10 ports to test before it boots up. But in general, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes for it to boot up and become usable.
Any plans for hardened versions for an outside cabinet?
Not at this time.
Third-party SFPs. Get a lot of smiley faces on the router comment. Yes, we're working hard on getting layer 3 functionality and security functionality in the devices. We just don't have anything to announce quite yet.
So yeah, when are diagnostic features coming to the CloudTrax console? Matt asks. They will be coming in the access points very soon, in the next couple months, and the switch firmware also supports it, so we'll be introducing that as we can.
Okay. So the question is, would the firewall functionality be backwards compatible? I'd love to be able to answer that. We don't have a whole lot of answers yet on the router/firewall. So not many answers on that yet. When we have more announcements, we'll be able to share more information.
So there was a question about SNMP MIBs. There are some generic MIBs that we can provide if you go through support.
Okay. Can you limit which IPs connect to CloudTrax for security reasons?
Not through any of our devices. That is that's something you would want to do probably in the router level. And since CloudTrax is hosted in Amazon, IP addresses are subject to change. So it's best not to deny or to deny or whitelist any specific IP address that you get for CloudTrax. So you'd want to do it via DNS.
Great question here. Can we use your marketing materials rebranded also? The answer is yes. We don't have them in a repository right now. We are working on creating a better partner portal so that we can share that. So that there'll be 3 versions of each of our data sheets. One that will be OpenMesh branded, one that will be able to be co-branded OpenMesh and the name of a company, and one that will be blank from an OpenMesh perspective, so it can be branded by you alone. Is 2-factor authentication on the roadmap?
Yes, it's something that we're looking into and working on, especially as we get more and more customers that are demanding it. So yes, it's something we're working on. Don't have any timelines on it right now, though.
Can I see what is being used on a specific switch port, like on the network overview for SSIDs?
No. So the switch, because it's only looking at layer 2 traffic and a very limited amount of layer 3 traffic for the IPv4 filtering, it doesn't have the full stack viewing that the access points are doing. So you don't get the same layer 7 application view that you would get for traffic that's going through the access points.
Okay. If there is an issue at AWS, will it affect the performance of the switch other than configuration changes?
No. So the switches and the access points all have out-of-band management. So if CloudTrax ever goes down or Amazon has a hiccup, like they did a couple weeks ago, they will continue functioning as they did before. So the only difference would be that you wouldn't see check-ins during that time period. You wouldn't see any of the application usage during that time period. But your network would continue to function just as if nothing had happened.
So some more questions about future products, thoughts on a 4-port switch. Everything's on the table right now. Like I said, we're looking at going both up and down in size and capability, but again, don't have anything to announce quite yet.
Steve asks, if you're not currently getting VAR pricing on products, who do you contact? Contact sales@openmesh.com. Just send an email to us there, and our salespeople will set up a call to go over that with you.
Your client's range. All right, so we're kind of running into some redundant questions now. You see anything else, Brian, that we can answer quickly? So a question about what about switches with more than 48 ports? Like I said, we're looking both up and down. Most likely the next generation switches will be increased functionality of the current sizes or decreased functionality of the current sizes, just based on power and throughput and other things, so that we have a full range of products.
All right.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much for joining. We really appreciate it. This is our first one of these. I will be sending out a very short survey after this. If you could fill it out, we would greatly appreciate it, because what we're trying to do is get feedback for what will the next topics be beyond what's next week's or next month's?
The channels and radio management.
radio management, and then in May will be the captive portal. So we'll be asking what other things do you want to hear? How should we change the format, if at all, and things like that. So again, thank you all very much for joining. We will make this recording available, and you'll get that as part of the survey. You'll get that information so you can share it with others. I will share that through the middle of the presentation, my computer did disconnect and reconnect, so we may have a hole in the recording, but we'll see what we can do. Thank you all very much. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.